Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining this call that is being organized together by Checkpoint and South Asian Technologies. We are glad you can make it. Today we have the presentation done by Mr. Gary Gardner. Gary leads the team of security engineers in Asia Pacific and will take you through why it is important to look at security beyond the perimeter and not just look at only the perimeter. Without much ado, over to you, Gary.
Thank you, Venu. Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's always a pleasure to be presenting. I did say beforehand that it would be nice to be doing this in a hotel next to the beach somewhere in Sri Lanka, but obviously with the recent events globally, that's not the case. So what we'd like to do is just get started on talking about security and how we should be looking at that more so now, and I'll try not to mention COVID-19 too much in the presentation. But we've got to think about security outside the perimeter. It's a key aspect of everything we do, and what we have seen over the last 6 months, especially globally, and certainly for a lot of our customers, is that we have seen a move to a lot of remote working. Everyone's working from home. I myself haven't been in our office in Singapore since March, the start of March. I've been working from home this entire time, and most of my meetings are this kind of scenario where we're looking at a camera on a laptop instead of face-to-face. And so our architecture has had to evolve, and we've seen that happen rapidly for a lot of our customers over the last 6 months. They have been forced to move to this remote working architecture. And even we did a survey of the employees inside Checkpoint in the Asia Pacific region, and nearly 50% of them said, actually it was nearly 80% of them said they would prefer to work at home at least 1 to 2 days per week plus, given the situation that we're in now. So we can see that we are moving. We're moving to this remote workforce, and we have to be very much cognitive of that. Because we've moved the perimeter, there are certain aspects to that security paradigm that must change with it. And we have to take what we're securing inside our data center and be able to secure it effectively outside our data center. And to make sure that we get the same level of security, but also the same level of visibility, reporting, and compliance that we would normally have inside the data center as well. Now, I will take you through some of the information and a scenario as to how an attacker will actually go about using the devices outside of your network to gain access into your core. And what we typically see with deployments of remote working or outside of the perimeter, there seems to be less of a focus on security. One, because people think that the capabilities aren't there. Second of all, there seems to be a level of trust in the devices themselves, which is completely the opposite of the way we should look at it. Also, I mean, my mobile phone that I have here is my own personal device, but it has corporate data on there, and we have the technology to make sure that it's secure while it's on the device. But we have that mix of personal and business on the same device. The amount of people I speak to inside our organization who have given their phones to their kids to play games on it, and it has access to corporate information on it. You know, it's just one of those things that is expected. And I guess to a certain extent, when we're outside of the office, there's a little bit less of a office mentality, so we can be a little bit more carefree. And when you look at mobile devices, the hackers are finding it really easy to attack those. One, because the operating system or the applications are not as controlled as they would be inside a network environment, like an SOE, secure operating environment that we have. But they find it a lot easier to exploit the weaknesses once they're on those devices. So this morning, what I did is I took a look at our threat intelligence report, and I did it specifically for Sri Lanka, just to get an idea of, just to give you an overview of where Sri Lanka sits from a Checkpoint perspective around our threat cloud and all the information that we see. And the very interesting thing here is that Sri Lanka is being attacked nearly almost twice as many times as the global average for the last 6 months. And you can see the top malwares that exist there. But if you look at the table at the bottom, globally, 4.5% of the attacks we see are against mobile. And in Sri Lanka, it's 13.4%. Key stat when you think about talking about beyond the perimeter. Banking applications, crypto miners, and botnets make up the majority of the rest of them. So there's a high impact on your mobile devices because the attackers are attacking them. This is just the trend over the last 6 months, where you can see the attacks that are happening compared to the global trends. just to give you an idea that Sri Lanka is well above the global trends that Checkpoint is seeing. I wanted to give you the top malwares as well. The most important one, I guess, is the bottom is Hidad, which is a mobile Android malware. Again, targeting the mobile platforms. Very important, again, when we talk about beyond the perimeter. And then the malicious files, the majority are coming in via email. A lot more than what we would typically see globally. And then, again, the top malicious file types we saw over the last 30 days. So Excel spreadsheets, executables, RTFs are the main contenders there. And again, slightly above what we'd see from the global average. Top vulnerability exploit types we've seen. So remote code execution, authentication bypass is a key one, where people are actually trying to gain access through to systems by bypassing that authentication. And we can talk about that when it comes to the fact of authenticating users onto mobile devices and making sure that they are secure, and especially laptops as well. And here's the trend of mobile attacks over the last 6 months. So we have seen obviously a dip in June, quite a dramatic dip. I'm not entirely sure. I didn't get the chance to do a little bit of further digging as to why that's the case. But certainly for the last 6 months for this year, there's been quite a large amount of attacks on the mobile platforms inside Sri Lanka. So I'll just build out this slide. If we look at what we're talking about from beyond the perimeter, there's lots of common attack vectors that are being used. So whether it's laptops, smartphones, or your cloud applications, they're all going to be using email to gain access to your systems. They're going to be using it, as you saw in the stats before, email is the key attack vector. More so, I guess, when you talk about smartphones, because they are small devices, it's easy for people to put in malicious URLs that look like legitimate URLs. Say, for example, they send a phishing email to their smartphone. The smartphone has a login to Office 365 to reset the password, which is a malicious site. And then they can use that account takeover by getting the Office 365 password. And typically what we see with Office 365 is this is the key attack vector for the threat actors. They want to gain their credentials so that they can actually use that to then propagate their access throughout the network. One of the key attack processes we see is what they will actually do is they'll gain access to an email system inside Office 365. They'll set up a rule to forward every email that's sent and received from that account to themselves. It'll be a third party, it won't actually be their own domain. And then what they do is they'll read through all the emails and they'll get an understanding of what that person does inside the business, who's important inside the business, and then they will use that to then start phishing attacks on those people or sending malicious emails or requesting more information from those people. And it's just an easy way for the attackers to do this. And they're in those networks for months, sometimes years at a time doing this, just trying to gain that foothold. And with laptops, you've got obviously web attacks, file shares, phishing, malicious networks connecting to malicious Wi-Fi. For those of you who may have seen our announcement around the SIGREDS vulnerability around Microsoft DNS, that can be done through Open Wi-Fi. Open Wi-Fi can then obviously be again used to attack laptops and even mobile phones. But again, one of the key ones across all of them is the account takeover capabilities that the malicious attacker has. So what I want to do is take you through some of the steps that we see from a targeted attack to a mobile device. So in this situation, the victim is connecting to a friendly hotspot, or what they believe is a friendly hotspot. Now we know that there's capabilities to do man-in-the-middle attacks on Wi-Fi, and this is the situation here. So they've connected to what they believe is a friendly Wi-Fi. They've opened up a malicious application. So we've actually done this as live demonstrations at our events where you can use a QR code. You can easily put a QR code in an event, say download the application for that event, where you can look at the agenda, what's going on, where you can book into lab sessions and things like that. That QR code is a malicious application. That malicious application then runs on the phone. And again, a lot of people will just trust this because it looks legitimate at the coffee shop or the event that it's going on. What that then allows them to do is basically take control of the device. Again, some of the demonstrations that we've done on stage, When you're presenting, the code is actually running on your phone, and then what we do is we replay what we have just said because the phone has started recording your voice. You don't even know that it's happening. It's actually recording what's going on the screen, recording your passwords, just gaining that escalation of privileges that we see. Then the next process is account takeover. So what they want to do is then use the activity and the identity that they have to then gain access to cloud providers' email addresses. And this is one of the key factors when we move to the cloud, and a lot of people don't realize this, is we are moving what was typically an AD password sitting inside your network that if you were doing remotely, you'd have to go through a VPN, you'd have to do two-factor authentication to gain access. We're now putting that onto a web page. And if they gain access to that, they have access to your AD credentials and then all of the access that they have on top of that. So again, the other way to attack it is through a malicious phishing website. So they will send you an email. As I mentioned before, if you're looking at it on a smartphone or even on a tablet, the URL can be very small to read, and at a glance it looks legitimate. So you will click on it. It's then fooling the customer into putting in their credentials, which again allows for account takeover. And again, we end up in the same situation where we have access to your suite of products inside Office 365. So here's another situation where we're going through a laptop. Again, this is just showing the capabilities of a multi-vector attack. Because what we do find is that the bad guys will not just sit and say, okay, we're going to attack the mobile device, we'll attack the laptop as well. We'll attack the user through social media just to try and dupe them into gaining access into the system. So again, another example of an email. The email has a malicious attachment and a malicious link, which allows access to the system. And the laptop is infected by the malware, and it allows the attacker to accelerate the process of gaining access to the system. Again, they're using web activity, they're connecting to file shares, they're connecting to the Dropbox or the Office 365 capabilities, and they're then using that to gain access to account takeover, to install malicious more malicious applications onto the device, again, allowing them to do that. So what you see here is that there's no real distinct path for the attacker to gain access. Typically, the first way that they will do it is through email, but they can also do it through malicious networks. You can do it through a website. There's multiple ways that the attacker can gain access. So what we have looked at, and from a long time now, Check Point has realized that the traditional protections you have on your devices are just insufficient. They just don't work very well. Signatures and reputations do not protect against zero-day attacks. They never have done, and they never will do. What we're also seeing is that the polymorphic attacks, the bad guys are getting really good at circumventing what we call Generation 1 sandboxes. Sandboxes that are just looking at trying to execute codes. So the bad guys will look at ways to prevent the code from executing inside the sandbox for a certain period of time, or identifies that it's in a sandbox and takes different course of action. So we are seeing this more and more often. As we all know, smartphones and tablets are unfortunately inherently insecure. Check Point does a lot of research and is one of the top researchers for the Google platform, for the Android Play Store, about its capabilities to identify malware inside applications. And we publish those to Google every time we find them. What we also know is that a lot of people don't update the operating systems on their phones for whatever reason. They'll just say, no, later. So again, we are finding that it is increasing the capabilities of the malicious actors to be able to attack. And iOS is not immune from this as well. We see this across all mobile devices. And what we are seeing again is it's predominantly around trying to steal credentials and then gain access, as I've mentioned before. So within Check Point, what we've taken is a holistic approach to doing this. We're looking at a modern security platform that allows us to block zero-day viruses, block malicious URLs with no reputation, and block the malicious apps without a reputation. And we've done a lot of that through machine learning, artificial intelligence, and AI inside our threat cloud, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But what we are doing is looking at consolidating all of that threat intelligence across the multiple attack vectors. So if someone is attacking your data center, or your mobile devices, or your laptops, or your IoT devices, we get all of that information, we put it together, and we help protect the rest of the organization because we've identified it, that it's happening. So we get the capability. Also, if a customer, say, for example, in Brazil gets attacked and we identify it, we automatically take the process of updating your infrastructure, your mobile devices, your tablets, your laptops, your IoT devices to say, okay, you are now protected from something that we saw on the other side of the planet. And also, one of the key ones is we want to protect against careless end user behavior. So by sanitizing what's coming into the end user, sanitizing URLs, sanitizing documents, and making them secure and safe so that the user doesn't, through any inadvertent actions of their own, actually compromise what's happening inside your environment. Because as we all know, the end user is still the easiest way to attack this. So there's three key technologies, and I'll talk about cloud towards the end of the presentation and IoT, but there's three ways that we talk about based on what we just saw around an attack, three basic ways to do this security. First is CloudGuard SaaS, software as a service, the capability to provide the security platform that you see inside your network in the SaaS applications that you're running. We have SandBlast Agent for laptops, and we have SandBlast Mobile for smartphones and tablets. And we'll talk a little bit about those. But the key thing is that the detection engines across all of these technologies are consistent. So if someone is attacking your mobile, they're getting the same level of security as if they were attacking your SaaS application or they were attacking your actual network. And there's a whole list of them here. We're upwards of 60 plus engines just inside our threat cloud. And obviously that has a lot of AI in there and a lot of big data that we're using to identify that, to the point where we are deconstructing malware when we find it and looking at so a lot of malware will randomly generate URLs. So it will have a list of URLs inside its code that it will use as domains to download malicious code. Our AI's got so good that we can actually determine what those URLs are going to be before they're actually created and then mark them as malicious. So that even before a domain has been registered, we will mark that domain as being malicious so that when it is registered, we know that it's not legitimate. So when we look at SandBlast Mobile, the world has changed dramatically over the last 6 months, but before that, it was already in a process of change. We're seeing a lot more employees using mobile devices to gain access to corporate information. We know that mobile phishing is on the rise. We've seen that, and I didn't put the stats in specifically for COVID-19, trying to avoid that subject altogether, but we have seen a huge increase in the number of domains related to COVID-19 phishing attacks over the last 6 months. And as I mentioned, smartphones are being used for both personal and business. So again, that link between it being a business device and being a personal device is blurred. And we see users really just not thinking about their business, not having their business brain switched on, and thinking about that level of security when they're on their mobile device. So we see that we have that impact on what we're trying to do. If we look at the mobile threats, the infected apps inside Google Play and the Apple App Store are increasing. We've seen that a lot. We've seen the capability, and users will download applications that haven't been signed properly. Checkpoint itself actually has a heuristic engine where we go through applications when you download SandBlast Mobile. And what it will do is it will actually look at the signature of the application, when it was registered, is it trusted, has they had other applications published before, and then we gauge it based on that and other heuristics that we have in the background. We look for rogue Wi-Fi and man-in-the-middle attacks. We can even do that down to if there's something happening on the 4G network as well. We will look for malicious URLs. We'll look for malicious SMSs to make sure that they're not vulnerable to eavesdropping. And we will obviously report back to you to say that the operating system is old, or it's been rootkitted or jailbroken, and we feel that that's a security risk, and you can apply settings based on that. So what we're trying to do here is not only with SandBlast Mobile, but obviously we have a containerized application as well for your emails, is looking at the smartphone holistically, making sure that it is secure across everything that it does. We've made it really quick and easy to implement. It's full integration with current MDMs and EMM providers. And as I mentioned before, because we're sharing the same intelligence that you get on a security gateway with a mobile phone, you're getting the best malware protection that you can possibly get on those devices. So again, I've talked through most of those, but really just to give you an idea of what it does and how it actually works on the phone. So there's on-device analysis, there's machine learning based on the apps itself. As I mentioned, we look at the application, we understand whether that application has been trusted before by other devices because we've done the analysis. So every time an application is downloaded, we don't have to do the analysis, which helps with the battery utilization, because that's one of the major concerns that we've always had with customers is how much battery does this actually use? On my phone, it never comes up as one of the most battery intensive applications on my phone. We look at malicious URLs, and I mentioned from an SMS perspective, we will sanitize URLs that are coming into the device. But we also talk to the clouds. We've got application reputation. We do basic app investigation. We look at the statistics, the dynamic analysis of what the application is trying to do and what we've seen it trying to do on other devices. And we provide that capability inside the console so you can see exactly what's happening on the devices around policy control, monitoring the devices themselves. We can even actually allow users to, if they add another device, to self-register that device. So you don't have to worry about it from an administration perspective. They just download the application and off it goes, it's up and running. So let's talk about the agent side of things, because obviously that's mobile. Laptop is another attack vector. And we understand that sometimes you're going to have your own AV engines on here. So the SandBlast agent is capable of sitting on top of those. But we have to make sure that it's providing, I guess, a little bit more cyber resiliency on top of what we're doing. So as I mentioned, we need to close the gap around what the traditional AV engines are doing, and the fact that we need to prevent the malware with advanced engines, and signatures are not going to cut it anymore. So it adds on, if you already have a SandBlast, sorry, if you already have an AV engine on there, it will add on to that capability. We will prevent zero-day phishing attacks and malicious web downloads, because again, we can sanitize everything that's going on. We have the capability around automated forensics and remediation. So for example, and this is around ransomware, we have the capability to do full file restoration. So what does that mean? The SandBlast agent, what it will do is it will sit there, and every time you open a file, the first execution at runtime, it will take a copy of the file. Now, what we know is that the ransomware will wait for further commands to be run before it will actually execute and start encrypting the file. And then even if the ransomware is opening a file to encrypt it, that's a runtime event that we will detect, and we take a copy of it. So even if there is ransomware on your laptop, if we see a lot of files being opened quickly, we will look at the process and we will shut that process down. Now, in that time, it may have been able to ransomware 40 or 50 files. We will then, depending on the interaction you want with the user, automatically remediate that and report back on the forensics of what we have done. So the user doesn't even have to know that we've taken action. You can say a pop-up and say we've detected ransomware, we've executed on remediating the files. You can do that as well. So we have that capability. We can enumerate files and sanitize them. So what does that mean? We can actually, if you're downloading a file, and typically what Microsoft calls destination disappointment, if you have to scan a file, especially if it's a large file, large document, it takes time. And the end user can see a delay in downloading, and then eventually it appears. What Checkpoint has done is we've taken the other approach. What we will do is we'll take the document, we will remove everything malicious from that document, all the macros, we'll sanitize all the URLs so they can't be clicked, and then we'll provide you a copy of that. Now, if in the background, the file is being scanned to make sure that it isn't malicious. If it's not malicious and the end user wants to, they can request the file and get the original. If it is malicious, they request the file and we don't give it to them. We tell them, no, there was malware encoded in that. So we use this at Checkpoint. At the minute, we are sitting roughly between 5 to 6% of the original files that are requested by our users internally. It gives you an idea of the amount of files that we don't actually need the originals of. They just come into our inboxes clean. And what we're doing is taking the user effect out of it. We are making sure that we are not allowing the user to do something silly or not be allowing them to be duped into doing something silly. It comes in multiple flavors. So we have it if you're working with educational facilities, we've got it for Chromebooks. So for education, we have anti-bullying, URL filtering and safe search, obviously phishing and password reuse prevention. That's a key one as well. If you use your AD credentials inside, say, Facebook or something like that, we will tell you that you're using a corporate password inside social media and you should stop doing that. And then threat extraction, which is what I was talking about. We've obviously got the capabilities around Macintosh as well, and we're bringing in the VDI support. So what we have, I guess, is the 3D security capabilities for SandBlast Agent. So this is the light version of the agent, which has, as you can see here, a lot of technologies. We've got the forensics, threat emulation, threat extraction, anti-bot technology. So if the host is compromised and it's trying to attempt to contact the botnet, we will stop that from happening, which stops it connecting to command and control, and then stops the bot from actually trying to execute anything because it doesn't know what to do. Then we report back to the system administrator that that's there. Cadet is where we look at threat hunting and the capability to understand what is going on around campaigns. So what we do is we look at malware and we look at them holistically and say, okay, what is it trying to do? What campaign is it actually running against the internet? And based on that, we can apply heuristics and say, okay, what your laptop is doing right now is part of this campaign. So we will stop it from doing that. Excuse me. But we can also apply that to across our whole endpoint suite. So not just the SandBlast agent, it is included inside the whole endpoint security, which is what I'm currently running on my laptop, which gives you, again, multiple things around SSL VPN, compliance, application control. You can have an endpoint firewall, port protection, so we can protect what's getting connected into the device, document access control, so which documents you can and can't open and which are trusted inside your network. We have document encryption, external media encryption, so every time I plug something into my laptop and I want to copy off a corporate file, I get asked to encrypt it because it's not going to a trusted device, and then full disk encryption on the laptop as well. So on top of what we're doing inside the endpoint for SandBlast, you have a capability to secure the full device itself. So if it ever lost or stolen, you don't have to worry about people gaining access. So let's talk about part of the cloud when we talk about software as a service. And I've only got 15 minutes, so I'll keep going as quick as I can. So we have, obviously, as you can see here, support for all of the major software as a service providers. But specifically, let's talk about Office 365. But what we have seen is an increase in customers looking at these cloud providers to provide corporate services. Office 365 is probably the most popular one, but they become, and as I mentioned, a real attack vector for the bad guys, the threat actors to try and gain access into your network. Because as I mentioned, you're providing access to corporate information on a web interface now. So what we're seeing is that the threat actors are really, really trying hard to gain access into Office 365. Now, we have the capability to secure it. It can be agent or agentless. We are stopping phishing attacks coming into Office 365 and G Suite. But the main thing as well is what we're trying to do is give you full visibility across everything that's happening inside that cloud-based environment for you. And the main thing is, because it is cloud-based, it's really easy to deploy. It takes no time whatsoever to do. So how it works, we integrate with the authentication platforms. So again, we can provide that authentication so we can trust a device. We don't want to just trust a user. We want to be able to trust a device as well. So again, you can say if this user A is connecting from device B, that's okay. But if they're connecting from device C, that's not legitimate. Why are they connecting from there? That's not a trusted device. That can be agent or agentless, depending on how you want to do it. We obviously use APIs to integrate into what's happening inside G Suite, Office 365, Dropbox, and Box Suite of products, so that it's as unintrusive to the platform that the end users are seeing. In fact, they don't really see anything except when we sanitize documents. As I mentioned, looking at the risk profile for the devices that are connecting. It's intuitive cloud management. So if you're wanting to just manage it through the cloud, it's there. So you're using cloud for your Office 365. Why not use cloud to manage it? Again, you're getting the threat intelligence that we have across the entire platform. It's all there. And you have that advanced threat prevention. So we have the capability to do anti-malware, anti-phishing, a lot of other technologies on there. So as it mentions here, we can do revealing shadow IT. So if an end user is getting emails for a product that you don't have as a trusted product, or it's not something on your list, and you're using their AD credentials and the emails coming into corporate, we can identify that as a shadow IT. Excuse me. So just to summarize on this, obviously we are leveraging the best suite of detection engines across all three of these technologies. We want to focus on prevention and remediation. Checkpoint has an ethos of preventing attacks, not just detecting them once they've happened. So all of our technology is based around stopping it from happening in the first place. And obviously then you've got the database of incidents of compromise that we see inside our threat cloud. And I'll talk a little bit about threat cloud later. But let's talk about the cloud itself. Let's talk about generically the cloud itself, because obviously that's beyond the perimeter as well. So we are moving from traditional data centers, from traditional branch offices, the three-tiered applications that we typically have inside our data center are moving over to the cloud as well. And on-premise applications are being moved. So we are moving to a hybrid and public cloud. Remote access is directly to the cloud in some cases. Containerization and server-based microservices are making a rapid increase. We're seeing that a lot. And then obviously SaaS applications. And predominantly what we've seen from a security perspective when we move into the cloud, that is getting slowed down by security. We don't want that to be the case. So what we need to do is provide security at the speed of DevOps. Now, what we are seeing around a blueprint is we need to be able to provide network security and threat prevention that we did inside the data center. So we need to be able to provide that level of security. The key one here, and something that we speak to a lot of customers about, is their security posture management inside the cloud. It's easy to manage inside your data center. You have that capability because you know what's being plugged in and you know what's existing inside your data center. The real challenge comes inside a cloud environment because it is dynamic. Things can be quickly spun up and torn down. So understanding that posture, understanding the compliance requirements that you have, and being able to manage that effectively. Application security. So we are looking at the capability to secure microservices, looking at the code itself to understand exactly what's going on, and then obviously take all of that and apply the threat intelligence and threat hunting. So we need it at the speed of DevOps. So this is where, if we look at Checkpoint's methodology around securing the cloud, we are applying security at all aspects of this because we understand that if there's a weak spot inside the cloud, the threat actors are going to be able to get in there and they're going to use that as a foothold. So when we talk about infrastructure as a service, the capability to provide that security gateway that you would have inside your data center to monitor east, west, and north-south traffic. Cloud security posture management, as I mentioned, we have the capability to look at your cloud-based environment, understand where applications have been deployed, the connectivity they have, not only with other applications and other workloads inside the cloud, but also outside of the cloud. So if you have a authentication or administrative connection that's accessible to the internet, we can actually identify that and take action automatically to shut that down. Or if someone looks at providing a service into the cloud and puts it into the wrong security group, we can take action against that as well, while applying all of the compliance infrastructure that you would have internally to your cloud-based environment and reporting on that. We also have, when we look at workload and protection around containers and serverless, we have the capability to look at code at runtime. So when code is deployed, we can have a look at it and see whether it's malicious or there is something, there's been an error put into the code, and we can report back on that. We can apply the same security posture management to those workloads to understand exactly what's going on. So we are moving security as far left as possible to where the code is being deployed and being written by the developers. But again, doing that in a way that still allows those DevOps guys to be able to do what they need to do. If you look at someone like, I think it's Netflix, they have upwards of 100 different deployments each day in different ways that they do code. So being able to apply security at that level is important. We're seeing an increase in obviously web application and APIs. So again, providing the security around the APIs to make sure that when they're making the calls, they're doing secure calls, and what they're doing is what we expect them to do. And what we're doing now is taking the cloud intelligence and the threat hunting that we have and applying that to the cloud infrastructure. So having a holistic approach across everything that you see there and providing that threat hunting and capability to understand what's happening in your cloud environment as a whole, again, dynamically, to be able to provide that security. So I was given a big list of things to talk about. So the last one is IoT. Checkpoint has been looking at IoT security for about 4 to 5 years now. It's not something that's new to us. Prior to that, even inside our IPS and the network capability, we had signatures and we have the capability to identify the SCADA controls and protocols from an IoT perspective. What we have done very recently is looked at the capabilities to improve that. So we know they're all around us. We know from, not even from an industrial perspective, or even from a medical perspective, but in your own homes and in your own networks in your office, you have IoT devices in there, whether they're smart televisions or smart light bulbs or anything like that. We have that security there. So just to give you an idea, if you're looking at an enterprise of 5,000 employees, we expect to see about 20,000 IoT devices in there. A hospital of 500 beds, 10,000, and then when you look at a factory of 2,000 workers, around 5,000 industrial IoT devices. That's a large amount of devices that are now coming onto your IT networks from your OT networks. And being able to, first of all, identify those and then make security policy decisions based on those is important. Now, we did a survey, Forrester did a survey, and they're saying that 67% of organizations have experienced an IoT security incident. That's a vast amount. There's probably the other 33% don't actually know that it's happened. But what we are seeing is a lot of diverse devices coming onto your network that were never there in the past. A lot of them are headless, so you don't know what version of operating system they're running. There's no way to actually monitor them. They're running legacy OS. We still have in medical devices, things running Windows XP, Windows NT, especially with medical devices, because they're really expensive to get certified. They don't do it very often. You can't apply antivirus to them because if you do that, they're no longer certified. They don't have built-in security because the vendors making them don't care about security. They care about either healthcare or the functions on the smart TV or in the smart washing machine. We find them incredibly difficult to patch, especially in an industrial environment, because sometimes they're up 365 days a year, and being able to apply patches on a regular basis to those just don't allow for that. Typically, they've got weak passwords. There's a website called Shodan. You can actually go and look at IoT devices. It's basically the Google for vulnerable devices. You can go and look at that and you can see the list of devices that are connected to the internet that have default passwords. Don't log into them because that's when it gets from the legal to slightly illegal by doing that. But it's just giving you an idea that there are a vast amount of devices out there that you can gain access to. And here's an example. We did some research and we showed how a business networks can be hacked just from a light bulb, and the capability to deliver ransomware or spyware onto the network just from a smart light bulb. So we have, and the bad guys have the capability to do that right now. So we have an IoT protection capability. I've tried to condense this down into one slide and try and talk about it briefly because we're running out of time. So the number one key aspect is around securing IoT beyond your perimeter is trying to prevent the malware from entering the network. So obviously the typical network security you will need a gateway that has the capability to identify the devices on your network, but also apply that level of security. Segmentation of the device inside the network. So the capability of identifying the devices, and I'll talk about it on the next one, but also that it's key for segmentation. Keeping medical devices away from IT devices, keeping your industrial networks away from those devices is key to what we need to do. And how does Checkpoint do this? This is a whole half-hour presentation on its own, but we have the capability, and we work with partners to identify the devices themselves. So whether it's a PLC inside a industrial network, or it's a heart rate monitor inside a hospital, we identify the devices. And we've built the capability in our technology to say, based on the class of device, this is the automated policy that's applied to that device. So you'll have tens of thousands of devices on your network. You don't want to have to go through and say where and what policies and what rules are applied. We are wanting to do that to provide you a granular policy without the need of your interaction. So if something's plugged into the network, we identify it. We can even now, with the SCADA controls, identify what it's connecting to, the calls it's making from a SCADA capability, whether it's read-only, whether it's read-write, and apply a policy based on the default behavior of the device itself. So if anything else happens out of the ordinary, if the device has been compromised for whatever reason, we will not allow that to happen. So again, as it says, I mentioned, and block malicious traffic to and from those IoT devices, and being able to do virtual patching as well. We have a vast array of IPS signatures for IoT devices. So rather than having to run around and patch all of these devices, which can be hard and difficult to do, we can do this for you on the device itself, on the gateway itself. We are also working on the capability of what we're calling Nano Agents. So where we can't segment, we can actually put security on the device itself. And we are working with vendors around building control, medical, and industrial to embed that security code into those devices. But the key aspect to all of this is that it's all powered by Threat Cloud. And this is the smart bit of what Checkpoint does. We have a large data lake that we use artificial intelligence, we use a lot of big data, and we use a lot of machine learning to identify what's going in. And as you can see, we emulate more than 4 million files per day. We're stopping over 7,000 zero-day attacks per day, and 86 billion incidents of compromise per day are being identified by our Threat Cloud. Now, being able to take that intelligence and apply that across everything that you're doing outside of your network, from your mobiles, from your laptops, from your IoT devices, is a key fundamental way that we believe inside Checkpoint that you can secure everything outside of your network the way that you are securing it inside of your network. Excuse me. So just to summarize, we can provide the level of security that you need. As I mentioned before at the start, the multi-vector attacks that are coming into your organization are very intelligent, they are very smart. The bad guys are working their way around the security you have inside your data center by attacking these devices, and then using the credentials that they've deemed from that, legitimate credentials, to gain access into your network. So what we need to do predominantly is focus on preventing that from happening. Because once they're in, it's very difficult to identify that the malicious activity is going on because they're using credentials that are legitimate. And I'll give you one example of this that took us a little bit of time to convince the customer that this was bad. And you're probably thinking, how is that possible? We had a customer in New Zealand where we turned on the CloudGuard SaaS on their Office 365 network. Now, this was a customer who was solely based in New Zealand. And within 2 or 3 days, we identified that they were getting logons from Nigeria, because we can detect where the logon instance came from. And we said to them, this is bad. Someone has compromised your network. They have your credentials. You should get this person to reset their password. It took us 2 meetings with them to convince them that this was something that shouldn't be happening on their Office 365 network. So just that visibility, getting the incidents of compromise and all of that information through to your your remote devices is paramount. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. We may have some questions. I'm not sure if we do.
Do you want to open it out for questions?
Yeah, I'm happy to open it out for questions if someone wants to ask something.
Okay.
I don't see anything in the Q&A yet.
So we could do this two ways. If you have questions, you can either ask Gary directly, or you could add it on the Q&A chat. Otherwise, if you think that you will need more time, you can also send us your questions to South Asian Technologies, and we will together with them answer the questions and get back to you. So we could do it either ways.
Okay, we'll give them one more minute to type out the questions. Here we go. Yes. So the question is, should zero trust in policies be applied to IoT devices too? Yes, very much so. Checkpoint has a zero trust model, and it has developed its architecture around zero trust. So everything that we implement is looking at zero trust capability. So not only do we look at authenticating the user, but we also look at trusting the device as well. We don't believe that the user itself is just the only way that we should be trusting someone. So very much so, yes, zero trust for IoT devices should be there. Another question coming in, I think. What is the license policy? Okay, that's a long question depending on the technology you're looking at. So Checkpoint, let me start with an easy one. Checkpoint has an end user license agreement called its Infinity Total Protection, which basically looks at the cost per user to apply technology, any of Checkpoint's technology. That's the easiest way to, I guess, consume all of the technology outside of the perimeter. So we don't care what technology you're using, whether it's SaaS, whether it's IoT, whether it's smartphones, laptops, whether it's our cloud-based gateways. It's a license cost per user. So that's probably the easiest way for us to look at it from that perspective. The products are licensed in slightly different ways depending on the product. So if you want to consume just one or two of them, you can do it that way. But typically what we see with our customers when they're looking at beyond the perimeter across multiples of these devices, they look at the end user license agreement for that, which is an easy way to implement it. Okay, this question is, this is not just regarding IoT security. I would like to know how you verify if we've implemented the best security practices in our Checkpoint appliances, especially when it comes to IPS, AV, and anti-spoofing. Okay, there's a couple of ways that we can do this. We have an incident response team, which can actually come into your organization, and this is not just purely around Checkpoint. They can come in and do a tabletop exercise around your current environment, looking at it and understanding what's going on. And they can provide you a written report. And the tabletop exercise is not only just about your current infrastructure, it's about how you would handle an incident if it actually happened. The other side of it as well is from an architectural perspective, we can come in and have a discussion. We can do an architectural workshop with you around the current implementation of what you have. And we also have the capability to run what we call is, we can do an optimization on your security policy on the gateways as well, to have a look and see exactly what's going on. So there's a couple of ways that we can look at it from that perspective to make sure that you're getting, I guess, the best bang for buck. And also South Asian Technologies would be able to assist with that as well. It just doesn't have to be Checkpoint that comes and do that, but both South Asian Technologies and Checkpoint are capable of doing that for you. See if we get any more. Give it one more minute. Because usually once I start wrapping up is when the questions come in. Okay, I think that's it for the questions. Oh no, as I said it, one comes in. Is it a must to use two different firewall brands in perimeter internal, or can we use the same brand? And what are the advantages of it? Okay. There was a school of thought many years ago when I started out in this industry about using two different types of technology at the gateway, and some organizations still believe that that's the best way to do it. Gartner has changed their mind on this occasionally. What we see from Checkpoint, and one of the reasons why we advocate for a single vendor approach, is the capability to share the threat intelligence across what's happening inside your network. One of the key factors we see around organizations being compromised is that, especially if you look at a multi-vector attack, if they send an email to your corporate email, your AV may pick that up. And if it does, that's cool. And what it will do is it will report back to vendor A that it's picked up that malware. If you're using a separate vendor, as an example, for your web-based connectivity rather than email-based connectivity, that information is not going to be shared. So we're of the opinion that, and it's not just because we want you to buy all of our technology, but we're of the opinion that if you are going to pick up an attack in one vector, you should have the capability to share that information across all of the security technologies that you have. And the easiest way to do that is to have a single vendor that is capable of doing that and sharing that technology. It's not to say that using two different firewall brands is not a bad idea, but what it does do is it leads to complexity around the management and obviously the reporting, and as I mentioned, the threat sharing that happens across technologies from the same vendor. Hopefully that answers the question. Next one. Do you have cloud-based management for all your offerings or only on-prem? No, actually, we do have cloud-based offerings for pretty much all of it now. We are moving the last few pieces of technology into the cloud. So we are in beta testing for a full management platform for our gateways. But if you look at things like threat hunting, we have a secure SOC now. We have an Infinity SOC that's based on online. We have the endpoint management, the mobile management, the software as a service management, the security posture management, small business gateways are all managed from the cloud. So we have a vast array of cloud services. If you are interested, please have a chat with South Asian Technologies and we can come and do a demonstration for you around the technologies that we have inside the cloud. But yes, Checkpoint has been, over the last 12 to 18 months, probably 2 years, moved a lot of its technology now into cloud-based management. And then subsequently the capability to do a lot of orchestration and zero-touch deployments based on that cloud-based technology. Okay, I only have a couple of more minutes because I have another meeting in 4 minutes. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you everyone for your time today. I appreciate the opportunity to have this I'd say face-to-face, but one-to-many time inside the environment that we're currently in. So thank you very much for your time.